That report was from Richard Downs. I'm now joined by 15-year-old Alex Fogarty from the National Youth Council of Ireland's Vote at 16 campaign. You're also, Alex, Equality Officer for the Irish Second Level Students' Union, and Noel Howard, representing the Irish Association of Social Care Workers. First of all, Alex, you're going to be 16 next year. There are many people who would feel at 16 you're simply not mature enough to vote.
Well, I mean, that's always the debate in every stage, as we saw from the video. I mean, you know, it's the same with women, where they, with the mental capacity of voting, we're working class men, we're 21-year-olds up until 1973. So, I mean, it's not fixed on. Voting age will always change as the society develops and matures.
But you are quite clearly a very mature 15-year-old. You're not a typical 15-year-old. So maybe you might be mature enough to vote, but you're not typical of people your age.
Well, thanks, but I mean, like, there is, you know, people out there like over 18. If we were to do a test, if maturity is the question and knowledge of what we have, you know, not many 18-year-olds or older would pass the test, because I mean, you know, there is. You know, not everyone knows about politics. I mean, I know about politics because I'm interested in it. But I mean, if Vote at 16 was to come in, I mean, in the school system, it would be a lot more improved, and we would not know a lot more about politics.
What about that point, Noel? I mean, there's a lot of people over 18 who aren't very clued in at all, and yet they have the right to vote. So why should younger people like Alex be discriminated against?
Because I think essentially voting and exercising one's franchise, as we call it, is an adult construct, really, if I can put it like that. And certainly, I think there have been some cogent arguments around reducing the voting age to 16. But our worry in terms of the people that I would represent who work with the marginalised young people that they do, and marginalised children up to the ages of 18 and over, our worry, I suppose, is that it's an erosion of childhood to a great extent, and we have, our history tells us, and we don't need to be reminded, of how children were treated in the past, or who, you know, maltreated rather than treated. And that in a sense we need, because of our history, number one, and certainly for the benefit of children up until the age of 18. I mean, whether we like to believe it or not, 18 is the age at which a child becomes an adult. And that's obviously the wisdom around that is that there is a certain protection needed for people up to that age. I mean, for example, children of 16, 17, they can't do the lottery, they can't buy alcohol.
They can work.
They can work, yes, and and they can pay taxes. But equally, I mean, I would say in relation to paying of taxes, and that's the point that's been highlighted.
You work with 16 and 17-year-olds now. Of them, I mean, if you see Alex, he's clearly mature enough to vote, but the ones you work with, do you not think some of them will be mature enough to vote?
Well, quite frankly, Miriam, the 16 and 17-year-olds that I worked with for many, many years were children who lived on the margins, who had no childhood. And when I look at somebody like Alex, who clearly, as you have indicated there, has a certain maturity, he's articulate, but the children who are on the margins don't have that level.
What about that point that it makes you almost an adult too young, that if you get people and give them the right to vote too young, Alex, it puts almost too much responsibility on a child, and really up to 18, you're still a child.
That is true, and that's what the law states. But I mean, at 16, as you said, we gain a lot of responsibilities, and I think it's important that we practice our responsibilities and our rights, and that we have them. So I mean, yeah, like marginalised children, but like hardly giving them the right to vote is hardly a negative one. It almost gives them the voice they need. You know that way. So if they give them the vote, politicians will be more engaged. They will want to talk to more people, and they will have to engage young people to get the votes that they need.
Oh, no.
Well, I think, as far as the politicians are concerned, I think that to a certain extent, I can see situations or anticipate situations where if a politician knocks on a door and a person of 16 comes out to meet him, and the politicians, they're not going to be interested in what worries that 16 or 17-year-old have. They will want their vote, and they will make promises that I think at times will exploit the idealism of young people. They will make promises that won't be fulfilled.
Could Alex come back on that? But they might exploit your idealism, because certainly a lot of younger people aren't mature enough.
Well, I mean, we are well informed. 16 and 17-year-olds of this generation are a lot different to 20 years ago, or 10 years ago, or even 5 years ago. We are well informed through the internet and social media. I mean, as they said there, they know from the Gorey school, it means the largest school in Ireland, they know what they're talking about. So, I mean, that's something to go by. So, I mean, yeah, if someone knocks on my door and asks me to talk about politics, I'm going to go, oh, yeah, sure. But, I mean, they have to take into consideration, like I'm sure the government has made you certain promises, but I mean, they haven't gone very well. But I mean, doesn't really make a difference.
Why do you think the government has backed off at the moment in the referendum? Do you think they're nervous about who young people like you might vote for?
No, well, you know, we have to take the government's word for it. What they said is that they are afraid of people getting confused, having too many referendums on the same day. So we have to take their word for it.
The other possibility known is, of course, that the next government could determine whether young people like Alex are forced to emigrate or not. Their policies could determine his future. So even that alone, would that not give them a moral right to vote for what their future is?
But I mean, I think, Miriam, that there can be some unintended consequences here. I mean, at the end of the day, at the moment, young people under the 1991 Childcare Act and the 2001 Children Act have certain protections. They can't be named in court. Their anonymity is protected, and that's very important. Now, who knows, but down the road we may have a situation which a government might decide that, okay, they can vote at 16. So let's say that their anonymity is no longer preserved. If they can vote, and if they are mature enough to vote, surely they have to be mature enough to accept the responsibility of being named, let's say if they appear in court. The whole clean slate idea in the 2001 Act is that any offences apart from serious ones are wiped clear when they become 18. Will that then become 16? I think that there are a number of areas that perhaps haven't got the consideration that they should have had.
I mean, that's not what we're talking about today. We're talking about the voting age. It's not a negative at all. It's a positive. It's giving young people a voice. We're not talking about changing anything else other than the fact that we want 16 and 17-year-olds to be more involved in the democratic process and having their voice heard.
But they will have plenty of time, Miriam. I mean, what's the rush here? Why do we need to adultify children when, in fact, they will have plenty of time when they get to 18 to vote?
A sentence for you, go on, Alex.
Well, at 18, I mean, we have so many things to worry about. I mean, if I was 18, I wouldn't be too pushed on the registering. I mean, I'd be more worried about my leaving cert or leaving home or going to college. Whereas 16, you have that more time or, you know, that open mind.
Final question. You're only 15. Would you like to go into politics? Will I be interviewing you in a few years?
Oh, of course, yeah. Next politician.
Okay, well, look, Alex, thank you very much for coming in tonight. You too now. Dave.